Mark Carney has just terminated a $75 billion bilateral infrastructure agreement with the United States, the most extensive cross-border infrastructure proposal ever put forward between any two countries. It's over. And Donald Trump is rushing to rescue what remains: new crossings, widened tunnels, rapid freight rail routes, upgraded entry points, power network enhancements, electronic border processing. The whole U.S.-Canada frontier rebuilt and upgraded for modern times. A 15-year construction timeline, 400,000 jobs for American workers. Yet Carney simply left the negotiations. Warren Buffett described it as the biggest infrastructure chance the United States has squandered this century. And once you grasp why he claims the consequences span not years, but entire generations, you'll see this goes far beyond commerce. It's really about the future the U.S. has thrown away. Trump placed 3 calls to Ottawa within 2 days, desperate to preserve the arrangement. Carney ignored everyone. The White House rushed a high-level team north. Carney's staff turned down the session. The same figure who spent months assuring Americans that Canada relies on the U.S. far more than the reverse is now pleading for Canada to return to discussions that Canada largely shaped. Subscribe today because the details you're about to learn, what this project promised to deliver, the reasons Canada ended it, and Buffett's view of America's forfeiture will reshape your perspective on this trade conflict. To appreciate why scrapping this arrangement is so disastrous, you first need to know what the arrangement truly entailed. This went beyond a single crossing. It represented a comprehensive plan for North America's infrastructure moving forward. The North American Gateway Initiative took 4 years of talks spanning different U.S. administrations. It enjoyed cross-party backing in the United States, with governors from both sides, leaders of key border municipalities, and industry groups covering production, farming, transport, and power. On the Canadian end, major infrastructure companies and retirement funds led the funding, while combined U.S.-Canadian design groups had already finished initial blueprints for the opening stage. It was presented as the boldest joint infrastructure effort since the St. Lawrence Seaway, finished in 1959, which redefined commerce around the Great Lakes for 60 years. The Gateway Initiative aimed to achieve the equivalent transformation over the coming half-century. The previous occasion the two nations collaborated on something this massive, they redrew the economic map of a whole continent. This project was intended to repeat that achievement. Here's what the $75 billion would have delivered: 3 fresh international bridges, an additional span for the Blue Water Bridge linking Port Huron, Michigan with Sarnia, Ontario, one of the continent's heaviest commercial passages, now running at full limit on a bridge dating to the 1930s, a separate freight-only bridge at the Thousand Islands route tying northern New York to eastern Ontario, and a high-volume freight link joining the Winnipeg area to the Northern Plains states, creating a brand new supply chain pathway from the Canadian prairies into the American heartland. The package featured a significant upgrade to the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel, doubling car capacity, along with a new freight-specific tunnel under the St. Clair River built for future oversized loads that existing setups can't manage. It featured a 600-mile dedicated fast freight rail route from Chicago via Detroit to Toronto, the initial custom-designed high-speed freight railway in North America, built to transport cargo at 120 miles per hour and cut truck reliance on Interstates 94 and 69 by 35%. It featured full rebuilding of 12 principal border checkpoints, swapping outdated 1960s facilities for automated clearance, AI-assisted cargo screening, and advanced clearance tools that would drop average wait times from 45 minutes to below 10. 3 additional cross-border high-voltage power lines connecting Canadian hydro resources to U.S. demand hubs, supplying clean electricity sufficient for 4 million American households. A unified digital customs system shared by U.S. and Canadian agencies, removing paper records and slashing administrative expenses by roughly $8 billion each year. Plus dredging and updating 3 key Great Lakes harbors to accommodate larger modern container ships, along with a fresh intermodal center linking lake shipping to the broader rail grid. Combined, this transcended mere construction. It formed the backbone system for North American commerce over the next 50 years. Every crossing, track, harbor, and electronic setup was engineered to function as one cohesive system, turning the US-Canada boundary into the planet's smoothest trade passage. No rival bilateral route worldwide, not Europe's internal grid, not China's ASEAN links, not the US-Mexico frontier, would match it. The figures revealed the scale. Overall expense, $75 billion spread across 15 years. Funding split, $45 billion from Canada, $30 billion from the United States. Canada covering 60% since its companies would handle most building work. American employment, 400,000 direct roles in construction and design during the 15-year phase. Secondary jobs, roughly 1.2 million more in supporting chains, services, machinery, production, and transport. Projected yearly economic gain once everything operated, about $120 billion extra in two-way trade volume. For each dollar the U.S. put in, it would receive $4 back in activity. That's beyond a trade pact. It's practically a windfall, and the United States has now forfeited it. Canada agreed to fund 60% not out of generosity. Major Canadian pension plans, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, Quebec's CDPQ, had pledged billions, viewing it as a reliable 50-year asset yielding steady income from fees and rising commerce. Leading Canadian builders and designers like Econ, SNC-Lavalin, and PCL stood to secure most contracts, ensuring long-term, high-value projects. Canada regarded the project as a calculated move to strengthen its export strength. Superior facilities meant quicker, lower-cost entry to the American marketplace, translating to greater sales of Canadian products to 330 million U.S. buyers. Canada wasn't granting America assistance. It was securing its own prosperity. But that commitment demanded one key element: a dependable, logical, consistent counterpart across the border. And that's precisely what Canada sees as missing now. That's the core reason Carney ended it. The declaration arrived not through dramatic political rhetoric, but with the measured tone of a quarterly earnings briefing. Carney appeared at a lectern in Ottawa, accompanied by his finance chief and leaders of the three pension organizations central to the financing, and issued a statement so straightforward it rendered the impact almost formulaic. Following thorough assessment, he stated, Canada has determined the present bilateral climate does not justify a $75 billion extended-term infrastructure commitment with the United States. The North American Gateway Initiative is now halted without a set resumption date. Halted without a set resumption date. In global corporate terms, that equates to finished, not deferred, not open to revision, finished. Carney listed three factors, each crushing by itself. Collectively, they formed a fundamental critique of the full U.S.-Canada dynamic under the present U.S. leadership. The initial factor was confidence. Projects of this magnitude demand 15 to 20-year outlooks, binding agreements, funding setups, design schedules, building timetables. Everything rests on the core premise that relations will hold steady for decades. Trump's trade conflict shattered that premise. You cannot commit $45 billion to links tying your economy to a counterpart, simultaneously levying duties on your shipments, endangering your sectors, openly questioning your independence, and showing repeatedly that it treats the partnership as a short-term bargain instead of a lasting alliance. The duties rendered the commitment illogical, prompting every Canadian pension entity with pledged funds to reassess as soon as those duties appeared. By Carney's formal cancellation, much of the private backing on Canada's portion had already indicated exit. The second factor concerned income. The Gateway's complete economic structure assumed two-way trade would expand 3 to 5% yearly throughout the project's duration, a sensible forecast grounded in long-term patterns and endorsed by leading financial bodies during vetting. Fee income, clearance charges, rail volumes, port activity, power transfer payments. Every income source in the model depended on increasing flows between nations, whose integration had strengthened annually since the initial Free Trade Pact. But Trump's duties failed to expand trade. They contracted it. Cross-border activity shrank 8 to 12% amid duties, countermeasures, chain interruptions, and widespread doubt that cooled investment on both sides. Firms expanding cross-border work halted. Producers deepening integration retreated. Trade levels that rose consistently for 35 years fell for the first time since the 2008 downturn. Picture constructing a 600-mile freight rail meant to shuttle products between partners, only for one partner to launch a trade conflict, shrinking those products. The rail shifts instantly from sound investment to financial burden. The calculations collapsed, not from design issues or budget excesses, but because the trade conflict obliterated the income basis, justifying everything. Canadian pension stewards, bound by strict duty to safeguard millions of retirees' funds, had no choice but to withdraw capital whose forecasts American policy had wrecked. The third factor will trouble U.S. leaders for generations: the strategic redirection. Canada is channeling the $45 billion once destined for U.S.-linked facilities into routes bypassing the United States entirely. Fresh Pacific Gateway upgrades, enlarged harbors in Vancouver, and Prince Rupert aimed at surging markets in China, Japan, South Korea, and India. New Atlantic Gateway developments, enhanced deep-sea facilities in Halifax geared toward Europe, Arctic pathway progress linking Canadian assets to emerging northern sea lanes as ice diminishes, and nationwide freight rail improvements boosting domestic efficiency and cutting reliance on U.S. passages. The funds aren't vanishing, they're shifting elsewhere, and that elsewhere excludes America. Carney's complete remarks closed with a section Washington diplomats labeled the harshest statement from any Allied head during this trade conflict. Canada refrains from funding uncertainty. The North American Gateway Initiative demanded a 15-year collaboration rooted in reciprocal confidence, reliable trade rules, and joint dedication to economic unity. Those foundations have vanished. Should they return, if they return, Canada will weigh renewed talks. Until then, our infrastructure funds will direct toward counterparts providing the steadiness and certainty essential for extended commitments. He spoke evenly, without naming Trump. He simply declared, in the composed style of global commerce, that Canada no longer views the United States as a trustworthy long-term investment ally for a nation that's been America's nearest economic partner for a century. That declaration stands as the trade war's most damaging remark, not for its heat, but for its accuracy. Then Warren Buffett clarified America's exact loss. Buffett avoided press releases or investor notes. He spoke plainly during a seldom-seen public talk at an Omaha business gathering, and his manner differed from any prior trade war remarks. The frustration once evident in his tariff critiques had vanished. In its place came something more disturbing: regret. The regret of someone witnessing an irreplaceable loss. The North American Gateway Initiative, Buffett stated, represented the foremost infrastructure prospect for the United States in this century. Not merely for its price tag, though $75 billion matters, but for its actual creations. A trade framework so streamlined, sophisticated, and unified, it would have secured North America an unbeatable edge over every global trade route for the next half-century. And now it's lost, not due to cost barriers or feasibility problems, but because we rendered it impossible for our ally to agree. He stopped. I've seen America cede manufacturing to China. I've seen it surrender chip production to Taiwan and South Korea. I've seen it lag on infrastructure spending for 4 decades as others constructed tomorrow. This project offered a leap forward to erect something every trade bloc would envy. And we destroyed it through duties. Destroyed it through duties. 5 words summing up the full tragedy. On the long-term toll, Buffett grew blunter. Infrastructure differs from typical investments. Lose a trade pact and you renegotiate. Lose a plant and you rebuild. But forfeit the chance to create genuine, engineered infrastructure requiring 15 years to realize. And that chance rarely returns in your era. The Gateway Initiative won't revive. The money has moved. The specialists have scattered. The funds head to Asian and European routes. The facilities America required, the crossings, tracks, harbors, power links, digital tools, won't materialize. Not soon, not in 10 years. The divide between America's current setup and its requirements will will widen. In 2 decades, the United States will haul goods over the Canadian line on 1960s-era structures, while others trade via 2030s-built systems. Berkshire Hathaway held direct interests in the project, so Buffett's sorrow felt both national and personal. BNSF Railway, Berkshire's fully owned freight operation and a top North American carrier, would have gained enormously from the gateway. The new Chicago-Detroit-Toronto freight path would have linked seamlessly to BNSF's system, forming a continent-wide rail network generating billions in added income over 3 decades. Berkshire's building supply arms, Johns Manville, Acme Brick, and similar, had positioned for bids on concrete, steel, insulation, and materials the project would demand across its 15-year span. Berkshire's power units planned involvement in grid connections, tying Canadian hydro to U.S. networks via assets Berkshire would partly control. Even Berkshire's insurance branches had crafted tailored coverage for the construction risks. Buffett spoke not only as a leading national figure or revered investor, but as someone whose enterprises would have profited across multiple divisions, only to see those gains vanish due to a trade approach he had cautioned against from the outset. His closing judgment carried exceptional weight and will linger in policy debates. The infrastructure shortfall between America's possessions and its necessities already exceeds any since before the 1950s interstate era. This project would have narrowed that shortfall at the border, North America's vital commerce bottleneck. Absent it, the shortfall grows annually. Eventually, it becomes the limit, capping American economic expansion. You can possess top-tier plants, skilled labor, innovative firms, but inefficient border movement renders it irrelevant. The limit remains. Now consider Trump's frantic response. The urgency after Carney's declaration surpassed anything seen from this administration in the trade conflict. Hours after the news, Trump dialed Ottawa 3 times. The first reached Carney's top aide, 4 minutes, termed strained and fruitless by Canadian sources. The second went to Canada's foreign minister. Trump allegedly proposed tariff adjustments if Canada resumed gateway talks. The minister heard him out, ended politely, and offered no follow-up. The third targeted Carney directly. Carney refused it. His staff replied to the White House with 1 sentence. The Prime Minister's stance was stated publicly. 3 attempts in 48 hours, 2 accepted and courteously declined, 1 avoided entirely. For someone whose brand rests on unmatched deal-making, failing to secure even a conversation marks profound embarrassment, challenging his core claim. The White House hurried a crisis team to Ottawa, the Commerce Secretary, Trade Envoy, and 2 senior security aides. They anticipated cabinet-level Canadian counterparts. Instead, mid-tier trade staff greeted them. Carney's team refused anyone senior to deputy director. The globe's strongest economy dispatched its commerce head, and Canada answered with a routine official. Diplomats call it lowered priority. Plainly, its dismissal as unworthy of effort. The group flew back after 90 minutes. 0 agreements, 0 promises, 0 schedule for more. Trump's public stance shifted in 2 clear stages, revealing everything. Stage 1, right after, defiant. We don't require their crossings. We'll construct our own. America employs the finest builders. That confidence held roughly 24 hours. The interval until advisors explained the implications of $75 billion vanished infrastructure, 400,000 missing jobs, and $120 billion yearly trade loss for the economy, especially his electoral map in border regions. Stage 2 dawned next morning, markedly altered. We're willing to talk. This arrangement aids everyone. Canada ought to negotiate. The pivot from rejecting their crossings to urging Canada back required precisely 24 hours. News channels displayed side-by-side clips. Online reactions surged. Carney's team met the reversal with quiet, diplomatic thunder louder than words. Border state governors intensified Trump's difficulty. Leaders from Michigan, New York, Minnesota, Washington, Montana, North Dakota, Ohio, Vermont, and Maine released condemnations avoiding any White House shield. Michigan's governor spoke plainly. This project would have generated 60,000 Michigan positions and elevated the Detroit-Windsor zone to the Western Hemisphere's leading commercial link. We forfeited it due to a trade conflict Michigan residents never sought and Michigan employees now endure. New York's governor demanded swift federal duty relief before revival and noted the Thousand Islands upgrade would have produced 15,000 building roles in struggling upstate areas. Washington's governor stressed Pacific Highway improvements easing British Columbia trade, terming the loss self-inflicted economic harm my state will bear for decades. A cross-party group of border governors formally urged the White House for direct Canada talks and tariff cessation that doomed the effort. Industry groups in Detroit, Buffalo, Seattle, and Minneapolis began urgent advocacy, with Detroit's chamber holding an emergency vote to oppose administration trade policy publicly for the first time ever. Governors directed anger not at Canada, but at the White House. They recognized what Trump grasped slowly. Canada didn't terminate this project. The trade conflict did, and Trump chose that conflict. Even full tariff reversal tomorrow won't revive the deal automatically. That's the harsh structural truth amplifying the damage. Canadian pension entities with billions committed have already shifted funds to Pacific Gateway harbors, European projects, Asian routes, specialized engineering groups, hundreds of bridge, tunnel, rail, port experts assembled over 4 years, disbanded and reassigned worldwide. The multi-year project framework can't reconstruct via phone. Canceling a $75 billion initiative differs from dropping a booking. You can't reclaim the slot. Capital departed, teams dissolved, political momentum faded. The rare convergence of financing, expertise, institutional support, and bilateral alignment enabling this may not align again for decades. Consider America's long-term forfeiture, not next quarter or budget cycle, but across 50 years. U.S.-Canada border facilities age disastrously. The Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor from 1929 approaches a century old. It handles 25% of bilateral truck traffic on a design predating highways, containers, digital trade. The Blue Water Bridge, 1938 origin with 1997 widening, already maxed. The Peace Bridge, Buffalo-Fort Erie from 1927, suffers chronic backups for generations. Most checkpoints use 1960s structures with 1990s tech. America's link to its top trade partner relies on pre-World War II bridges, pre-internet customs, decades-old freight lacking major renewal. The gateway would have modernized everything, now nothing does. As U.S. border assets stall, global peers advance at alarming speed. China's Belt and Road exceeds $1 trillion in worldwide facilities. New harbors, tracks, logistics spanning Asia, Africa, Europe, reaching 140 nations. The EU's trans-European network pours hundreds of billions into continental upgrades, fast rail uniting cities, automated harbors processing in minutes, real-time digital freight tracking. Southeast Asia connects ASEAN via fresh corridors, Kunming-Singapore rail, Java Sea links, Vietnam-Indonesia, port growth reshaping regional flow. Every major trade bloc invests heavily. Quicker harbors, intelligent clearance, unified platforms, near-instant digital handling. America trails, not gradually, swiftly. The gateway would have vaulted North America ahead, creating the planet's premier bilateral trade route. Without it, America recedes yearly. The divide from global benchmarks expands with every Shanghai harbor launch, Rotterdam rail connection, Singapore digital system activation. The economics are stark. A 45-minute border delay inflates costs per item. Asian-European routes target 5-minute passages. That difference multiplies across millions of crossings into billions in lost edge for U.S. firms. Higher prices, delayed shipments, reduced share. Canada's $45 billion redirection is precise. Vancouver Prince Rupert become elite Asian terminals with the same pension money once for Michigan-New York links. Halifax rises as Europe hub. Domestic rail upgrades lessen U.S. corridor needs. Arctic routes tie resources to ice-free northern paths. The investment didn't vanish. It built connections, bypassing America. Each Pacific-facing Canadian harbor diminishes U.S. border relevance to Canadian trade. Each internal rail improvement reduces crossings into Michigan, New York, Minnesota. Canada isn't retaliating, it's pursuing superior, dependable returns. The personal toll escapes spreadsheets, yet outweighs figures. 400,000 construction positions erased in border states needing renewal. Michigan, Ohio, New York, Minnesota, Washington, with declining industry and communities banking on infrastructure-driven revival. In Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, zoning adjusted for gateway staging. Buffalo developers bought borderland expecting new commerce. Detroit unions started specialized bridge tunnel training, all stalled. Builders slated for those crossings. Families awaiting wages. Towns planning booms starting next year. They bear costs of a trade conflict they never launched. Border town youth today won't experience this infrastructure during careers. The gateway was their economic path forward, now vanished. So this is the situation. Canada terminated the $75 billion North American Gateway Initiative, the grandest bilateral infrastructure proposal ever between nations. 3 new international bridges, upgraded tunnels, a 600-mile high-speed freight rail from Chicago to Toronto, 12 modernized entry points, power grid links energizing 4 million American homes, digital customs saving $8 billion yearly, Great Lakes port enhancements, 400,000 American jobs, $120 billion annual trade boost, 4.1 return per invested dollar, all ended. Carney ended it for 3 causes. The trade conflict eroded trust needed for long commitments. Duties invalidated revenue forecasts sustaining financing. Canada's strategic shift rerouted funds to Asian European routes excluding America. Trump attempted salvage. 3 Ottawa calls. 2 rebuffed politely, 1 unanswered. A crisis delegation met mid-level staff and departed in 90 minutes. A 24-hour tone switch from rejecting bridges to inviting talks convinced few. Bipartisan governors rebelled, demanding duty relief. Capital redeployed, teams scattered, construction opportunities sealed for a generation. And Warren Buffett, in his career's most sorrowful public remark, deemed it America's gravest 21st century infrastructure loss, cautioning that in 20 years the U.S. will haul goods over 1960s bridges while others use 2030 systems. This transcends one crossing. It's whether America can still construct a shared tomorrow with its nearest ally or has irreparably harmed the bond enabling that tomorrow. The $75 billion vanished. The 400,000 positions vanished. The 50-year edge vanished. Duties caused it. Observe the coming 12 months. Watch Canada start Pacific Gateway terminals financed by money once for American crossings. Watch Asian routes rise with capital meant for Detroit-Windsor modernization. Watch border assets continue deteriorating. The 1929 bridge bearing a quarter of truck trade, the 1938 bridge at limit, the 1927 bridge congested since before most Americans lived, while the world constructs tomorrow. The closed door won't reopen soon. Each year it remains shut. America's shortfall widens, its disadvantage deepens, waiting costs rise. Infrastructure won't self-assemble, capital won't return unaided. The partner ready to invest $45 billion in America's tomorrow placed it elsewhere. Carney didn't merely terminate an arrangement. He terminated the final plan for a joint North American tomorrow, and he did it because the other side placed that plan on fire.